Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, in a televised address to the nation, President Park Geun-hye vows a radical overhaul of the nation's safety systems, including the disbandment of the Korea Coast Guard. Prosecutors set up a special team to arrest the de facto owner of the Sewol-ho ferry operator Yoo Byung-eun, who has defied a prosecution summons. Plus, the government seeks to change the method of measuring unemployment amid criticism. The number of people effectively unemployed in Korea is triple the official figure. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Monday, May 19th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Ojin Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Now, 33 days have passed since the Sewol-ho ferry sank off Korea's southwestern coast, taking with it the lives of so many young people.
In what became a tearful nationally televised address Monday, President Park Geun-hye apologized for the tragedy and laid out measures to bolster national safety. Our correspondent Choi Yoo-sun has more.
이번 사고에 제대로 대처하지 못한 최종 책임은 대통령인 저에게 있습니다.
For the first time since the Sewol-ho ferry accident last month, President Park directly apologized to the nation. It came amid criticism of her previous apologies, as many people felt she wasn't taking full responsibility as the head of state. Saying that the Coast Guard had failed to fulfill its duties in swiftly attending to the passengers of the sinking ferry, President Park said she was dissolving the organization.
국가안전처를 만들어 각 부처에 분산된 안전 관련 조직을 통합하고 지휘 체계를 일원화해서 육상과 해상에서 일어나는 모든 유형의 재난에 현장 중심으로 대응할 수 있는 체제를 만들겠습니다.
President Park also talked about clamping down on hiring retired public employees to head public organizations and affiliates, which has been blamed for the government's insufficient and lax handling of the disaster. She suggested tripling the number of public organizations that are barred from employing retired public employees and extending the period after which retired workers can return to the workforce. Regarding the punishment of those linked to the ferry disaster, the president seemingly took account of what the victims' families requested during a meeting at the presidential office last week.
필요하다면 특검을 해서 모든 진상을 낱낱이 밝혀내고 엄정하게 처벌할 것입니다. 그리고 여야와 민간이 참여하는 진상조사위원회를 포함한 특별법을 만들 것도 제안합니다.
President Park said that she will not leave their deaths in vain and designate April 16, the day of the sinking, as a day to remember their sacrifices. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Prosecutors say they're done playing games with the de facto owner of Sewol-ho ferry operator Yoo Byung-eun, who so far refused to come in for questioning about his involvement in the disaster. Authorities have announced plans to bring in Yoo by the end of this week, and they formed a special team of investigators to do so. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
Prosecutors looking for the elusive practical owner of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry say they will make all effort to bring him in by week's end. In a briefing held Sunday, the leader of the Sewol-ho investigation task force said a special squad of more than 40 detectives would be formed to track Yoo Byung-eun down and arrest him. He said Yoo and his family have mocked the government and challenged authority in defying orders to come in for questioning. The 73-year-old is suspected of tax evasion and embezzlement of millions of dollars from company affiliates owned by him and members of his family. Prosecutors believe his illegal actions contributed to the sinking of the Sewol-ho ferry. Yoo is presumed to be holed up inside a religious compound his family owns in Gyeonggi-do province. The area is currently surrounded by supporters of Yoo who are blocking off authorities from entering. The prosecution has said it is considering raiding the compound. Arrest warrants for Yoo's second son and eldest daughter, both of whom are residing abroad, have been issued after the two failed to appear for questioning. Yoo's eldest son, who was involved in the day-to-day operations of the company that owned the Sewol-ho ferry, has also refused to cooperate with prosecutors. His whereabouts are unknown. Over a month has passed since the Sewol-ho ferry capsized off the southwestern coast of Korea. The confirmed death toll from the tragedy stands at 286, with 18 victims still unaccounted for. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And the Sewol-ho ferry disaster will be front and center of a month-long parliamentary session that opened at the National Assembly on this Monday. Now, the public is willing lawmakers to put their political differences aside to ensure to get some substantive results, but with the rival parties already bickering over the timing and scope of the investigation, there are fears the next 30 days could end up being an unproductive grind. Kim Young-gil reports.
The Sewol-ho ferry tragedy will dominate this month's parliamentary extraordinary session. Under the plans already agreed upon by the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, a request for a parliamentary investigation into the disaster will be submitted on Tuesday. It will be followed by a two-day session where lawmakers will grill government officials over the failed response to the nation's worst maritime disaster in decades. But not all related officials will appear.
The Oceans Minister and the Coast Guard Chief will not attend the hearings as they have the responsibility of being at the Sewol-ho ferry accident site.
The opposition alliance wants a number of investigations into the tragedy launched immediately. It is calling for a parliamentary probe, a separate independent council investigation, and a parliamentary hearing.
The special committee on Sewol-ho ferry opens today. We must devise measures to help the families of the victims, and we must conduct a parliamentary probe. The National Assembly must accomplish all we need to do.
However, the ruling party is likely to approach the issues more cautiously and focus more on follow-up measures and uncovering the cause of the accident. Especially with regard to the special council investigation, the two parties are unlikely to reach a consensus, with the Saenuri Party and New Politics Alliance for Democracy bickering over its timing and scope, as well as the appointment of a special counsel. Both rival parties plan to finalize the details of a special parliamentary investigation into the April ferry disaster on May 27th. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
A former U.S. official says the Obama administration's North Korea policy has failed. In an interview with South Korea's Yonhap news agency, Evans Revere, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, said the U.S. has set its focus too squarely on suspending the regime's nuclear development, knowing full well that Pyongyang has no intention of ever giving up its nuclear arms. The former diplomat, who is experienced in negotiating with the North, said Washington's policy is too passive, and he called for more pressure and stronger sanctions. He added the six-party denuclearization talks involving the two Koreas, the US, China, Japan and Russia, have lost their original objective due to Pyongyang's unwillingness to compromise. Now, South Korea's unemployment rate officially stands at 3.9%, which is an enviable figure compared to many other countries around the world. In reality, however, that figure is very far off the mark. Our Hwang Ji-ae tells us what's behind this discrepancy and what the government is doing to address it.
The latest version of Korea's jobs data shows that slightly over 1 million people are unemployed, but the data doesn't tell the whole story. Economists look past the official jobless rate to a so-called actual unemployment rate that includes those who are underemployed or discouraged from finding a job. Taking them into account, the actual jobless bracket included over 3 million individuals in April, more than 3 times the government's official figure. Statistics Korea, which compiles the jobs data, counts only those who don't have a job despite their efforts to get one. The nation's announced unemployment rate stood at 3.9% last month, but the actual jobless rate was 11%. Experts say the current method of counting the unemployed is too narrow and does not provide a real picture of the labor market conditions. In response to the criticism, the statistics agency plans to release a new set of data in November which provide jobless figures based on international standards, which include the underemployed and the discouraged. It said the extra data would give a more accurate explanation of the nation's job market. 황지, Arirang News.
Now, Samsung's dominance isn't merely limited to the smartphone market. 7 out of every 10 smartwatches sold globally in the first quarter this year were made by the Korean firm. US-based market research firm Strategy Analytics says Samsung Electronics shipped out some 500,000 smartwatches in the first 3 months of this year. That's good for more than 71% of the global market. That's a big jump from the 52% recorded last year, and also far ahead of Samsung's 2 closest competitors in the market, Sony and Pebble, both of which had 11% of the market in the first quarter. Strategy Analytics said the only possible threat to Samsung's dominance is Apple's iWatch, which is set to hit the market later this year.
Meanwhile, doctors treating Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Gun-hee say the 72-year-old is on the mend after suffering a heart attack over a week ago. Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul said Sunday that Lee is gradually getting better, and doctors are considering transferring him to a general ward, dispelling rumors that it's still touch and go whether he will make a full recovery. Samsung is reportedly considering legal options against those spreading rumors. The 72-year-old who helped build Samsung Electronics into one of the world's biggest tech firms has a history of health issues. This latest health scare, however, is expected to speed up the transfer of executive control to his only son, Lee Jae-yong. 3 of the nation's leading credit card firms are now fully back to work as a 3-month business suspension slapped on them for their involvement in the biggest personal data leak in Korean history has come to an end. However, financial authorities will keep an eye on them and stand ready with more sanctions if they step out of the line again. Kim Min-ji reports.
Credit card companies KB Kookmin Card, Lotte Card, and NH Nonghyup Card have resumed operations after a 3-month business suspension following the leak of personal data of some 140 million customers. Starting with online services, the card companies are now able to issue new credit cards, extend loans, and provide cash advances. The firms will also promote a series of new card products with ample benefits to attract new customers and make up for the loss incurred during the suspension period. The ban is believed to have cost the companies tens of millions of dollars and millions of customers. The country's biggest ever data leak was caused by an employee from a credit ratings agency stealing personal information, including identification numbers and bank account numbers, and selling it to an advertising company. Meanwhile, financial authorities are planning to offer greater incentives for reporting of illegal practices of card firms when issuing new credit cards. The Financial Supervisory Service said those who report of illegal methods to entice customers, such as issuing credit cards on the streets or offering giveaways that exceed 10% of the annual membership fee, will be able to receive roughly $490 in incentives, 5 times more than the original amount. The reporting period will also be extended to 60 days from the current 20 and can be done through the Credit Finance Association, the Financial Supervisory Service, or individual card companies. The financial authorities say they will inspect the credit card companies during the second half of the year, and if they conduct wrongdoings or irregularities, they will be subject to heftier punishment. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Workplace safety is making its way to the top of the agenda for local companies following a series of fatal accidents that have put the nation on edge. They have plans to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure employee safety, which will be directly linked to the future of their business. Our Paul Yi has the story.
A fire inside an LPG carrier at a shipyard of Hyundai Heavy Industries in Ulsan last month killed 2 workers while injuring 2 others. It was followed by another accident in the city a few weeks later when an explosion in a copper smelter operated by Ellis Nico injured 8 workers, including one who suffered second-degree burns. In light of these recent accidents, including the sinking of the tragically unsafe Sewol ferry, major local companies are expanding their budget and investment in safety-boosting measures. Samsung Group, which suffered a highly poisonous hydrofluoric acid gas leak last year, plans to earmark around $3 billion this year to enhance its safety systems. Hyundai Steel, which had reported several minor accidents over the years, increased its budget for safety-related operations from $120 million to some $500 million. As for Hyundai Heavy Industries, it will spend nearly $300 million to improve workplace safety, while also making a comprehensive plan for its security management. Businesses are shaking up their organizational structure as well. Asiana Airlines appointed an external safety expert as one of its vice presidents, while SK Hynix moved its environmental safety team into the headquarters and promoted the manager to vice president.
Environmental safety is the most basic element in company management. If these basic factors are not implemented well, it can cause a heavy blow to a company's growth in the long run.
Experts say the recent move to invest more to ensure workplace safety shouldn't be a temporary phenomenon, but regular procedure for local companies that want to secure stable and sustainable growth. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Time for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we now turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Eunice, there's been quite an exodus of Chinese nationals out of Vietnam over the weekend following the deadly anti-China rioting there.
That's right, Mark. Some 3,000 expats are reported to have fled Vietnam over the weekend. That number expected to grow as Beijing sends ships to evacuate more of its citizens in the coming days. Hanoi, in response, has promised stronger measures to quell the anti-China unrest. Here's Kim Ji-yeon with the story.
China is demanding Vietnam to do more to protect Chinese nationals amid anti-China protests in Vietnam, sparked by an oil rig in disputed waters in the South China Sea. Beijing is urging Hanoi to take tougher measures to quell the violence. It evacuated thousands of Chinese nationals from Vietnam following the attacks that killed at least 2 people and injured dozens. China has reportedly sent 2 charter flights and 5 ships to the region.
We sent our best crewmen to Vietnam for the evacuation.
A country heavily reliant on foreign investment, the Vietnamese government has called for an end to the protests. Businesses and workers affected by the unrest have criticized the local authorities for their lax response, accusing the police of arriving too late or in insufficient numbers. Vietnamese police have a reputation of blocking such demonstrations before they can take place. Anger spread and protests of hundreds took to the streets of Vietnam's major cities after a state-run energy firm from China towed an oil rig in waters claimed by both China and Vietnam. This recent spat is the worst since a border dispute between the 2 countries in 1979. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And Turkish police have charged 4 people with negligence in connection to the Soma coal mine collapse that claimed the lives of more than 300 workers. Turkey's semi-official Anadolu news agency reports the operating manager of Soma coal mining company was among those arrested, alongside 2 engineers and a security chief. Earlier, 25 were detained and questioned as part of the probe. This as mourning family members bury the last of the 301 workers killed in the large-scale accident. Demonstrations condemning the government's handling of the disaster continued into the weekend as hundreds of people occupied the capital of Ankara, Istanbul, and Izmir. In Soma, protests were banned by local authorities. Islamic rebel forces in Syria say the country's air defense chief was killed during combat operations in an area east of Damascus, a development also confirmed by Britain-based Monitor, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They said General Hussein Ishaq died from wounds incurred during an offensive by President Bashar al-Assad's forces aimed at taking more of the capital region ahead of a presidential election on June 3rd. Ishaq is one of the few top-ranking officers to die in Syria's 3-year civil war. And finally, the first suspected person-to-person transmission of the Middle East respiratory virus has been recorded in the United States. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said a man from Illinois likely picked up the infection from an Indiana man during a business meeting earlier this month, though he did not show the symptoms of the virus and was reportedly feeling fine. The Indiana man, however, was hospitalized shortly after traveling from Saudi Arabia, where he works as a healthcare worker. The U.S. Health Institute says the case does not change the risk to the general public, which remains low.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin Ju.
Market researcher Strategy Analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about... US lawmakers are calling for action against Korean steelmakers for selling products in the US for less than their market value. 56 members of the US Senate denounced a preliminary ruling made by the US Commerce Department in February that imposed anti-dumping duties on imports from 8 countries, but excluded steel pipes and tubes made here in Korea. They called for the Commerce Department to review Korea's case out of concern of the economic impact it has on struggling US steelmakers. A final determination may be made in July, with the US International Trade Commission making a final decision by August 21st. US telecom firm AT&T has announced plans to acquire top satellite service provider DirecTV for nearly $50 billion. The mammoth deal would make AT&T the #2 provider in terms of television subscribers in the US, behind a combined Comcast-Time Warner cable. The board of directors at both AT&T and DirecTV have already approved the deal, which has the potential to reshape the television landscape in the US. Under the terms, AT&T will pay $48.5 billion for DirecTV in both stock and cash, and also assume DirecTV debts, pushing the overall value of the deal to more than $67 billion. The companies hope the transaction can be completed in about 1 year. Comcast, the biggest cable provider in the US, is currently awaiting approval for plans to merge with Time Warner Cable.
Good afternoon. Well, the summer-like conditions should continue today. Temperatures will rise to upper 20s to low 30s in the most parts of the nation, with highs in the capital reaching 26 degrees Celsius. And the entire nation can expect to see more sun than clouds today, and the sunshine means it could feel hotter than the actual temperatures in the afternoon. In fact, it looks like hot and sunny weather will stick around for a while, with temperatures hovering in the upper 20s in the capital. So this week will make us feel like summer has arrived. Now, over in Jindo, at the site of the Sewol ferry accident, the winds and waves will continue to remain calm today, and the currents in the water will get weaker. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will rise to 26, while Daegu will peak at 32, and Gwangju and Busan should climb to 29 and 24 respectively. Let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will reach 25 and 29 later in the day. Dokdo should see a high of 22, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 14. Well, that's all for me today, but I'll be back with more updates tomorrow morning.
Okay, well, enjoy the weather. If you're watching us here in Korea, go outside and enjoy the sunshine. But those are stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.